The views, comments, stories, and opinions shared within this podcast are our own, or those of our guests, and in no way represent the views of the companies, associations, or organizations that any of us may work for or represent. All stories, events, and tales shared within this episode may or may not have happened in the manner in which they were told. They may or may not have even happened at all. The details have been changed to protect the innocent and the guilty alike. This is Squawk Ident. You're listening to Squawk Ident, an aviation podcast that explores the many pathways to an aviation profession, the challenges that a professional aviator can expect in today's marketplace, and we share many stories along the way. I'm your host, Av8rTony, a professional airline pilot currently flying for a U.S. legacy airline with close to 20 years on the flight line. This is episode 79 of the Squawk Ident podcast, recorded on the 19th of May, 2021, from the mobile Aviator Sound Studios high atop the 7th floor of the Doubletree Hotel in downtown Charlotte, North Carolina. On today's episode of the Squawk Ident podcast, Rob D and I discuss a few topics that have often been misunderstood. We explore a recent event aboard one of Av8rTony's very own flights that escalated to a security threat response that caused the aircraft to return back to the gate. We'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about noise abatement procedures and much more. But before we complete our pre-flight for episode 79, I would like to take a moment to express our many thanks to Andy Lucia for joining us on episode 78 of the Squawk Ident podcast, entitled The 10% Are Always Looking Ahead. We enjoyed exploring Andy's journey in aviation and his philosophies on creating a successful career in aviation. Thanks again, Andy, and we look forward to having you on the show again real soon. Now that our pre-flight is complete, let's get ready to push off the gate and start those virtual podcast engines. Flight 79 of the Squawk Ident podcast is officially underway. To help me kick off today's show is a superb aviator and Squawk Ident podcast co-host. He is a former international and professional racquetball champion, a member of the 9G Club, an AMP and avionics tech, an RC aircraft commander, a boat skipper, a commercial drone operator, and currently a 737 pilot for now. For Legacy Airlines, the name we use here on the show is an alias to our employer, a U.S. mainline carrier. From his man cave studio in Flower Mound, Texas, help us in welcoming back to the show our very own Rob D. Rob, how the heck are you?
What's that? Hey, it's good to be back, Tony. How the hell are you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good. It's been a crazy week this week. I know you and I have kind of had some discussions about what I've been through and what you've been through and some of the excitement coming your way. Tell me, what have you been up to? I know you had your final volleyball tournament for the season. That was a big deal and pretty exciting to hear.
Yeah, for all our listeners who've been listening to the podcast, you're probably well aware that my daughters are into club volleyball and we travel a lot. And last weekend was our final tournament of the season. We all traveled to Las Vegas and played the national qualifier. Unfortunately, our girls didn't qualify for the nationals, but they played really well, and it was really fun to watch them mature and grow and get better and stronger in the sport. And, all the camaraderie and the friendship that a team builds is just awesome to see all that. And the parents were awesome too. Great hanging out with them, especially in Vegas. But the cool thing was I got to ride in the jump seat both ways on the Airbus. Which is something I don't get to do very often because I don't commute and I rarely non-rev. So it's great because I'm getting ready to transition over to the Airbus. So I'm going to be joining you on the bus. Yep, and become a bus driver. I know. I got to make the jump, man.
Not another bus driver.
I know. I'm coming over to the I don't know, you wouldn't call it the dark side, but the the more relaxing side, I would I would think, because the
I prefer to say it's the civilized part of aviation.
the civilized, yeah. I got to learn how to speak French now and understand how these designers design this Airbus. But it's been going through some of the manuals already, and it looks it's pretty interesting.
Wow, you're getting ahead on the studying. That's great.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah,
you know, I've heard
start.
you've got a good resource somewhere out there. I don't know, somebody that you might know that might know a thing or two about the bus.
Yeah, there's
just saying.
I'm surrounded by bus drivers. I got you. I got my neighbor down the street. Got a couple other friends that fly the bus, so I've got a couple of resources I can tap into. And my neighbor, since he flies a bus, I told him, "Hey, man, I'm going to come over with a case of soda because he doesn't drink beer, and you're going to gouge me up and go through some profiles with me and
Yeah.
give me some, the inside scoop on some of this stuff."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's great to have those resources because the computer-based training that they have available to you prior to going for your long-term training is actually pretty intensive. There's so many resources. I mean, just the FMS trainer alone, you can actually perform an entire flight with the simulation with the trainer, and it's actually a great way to learn the FMGC or the box. And so you'll have plenty of resources provided by the company, and at the same time you'll have all of your friends and neighbors that can help you out with all the little techniques that maybe are not displayed in there. So congratulations, cool. Man. I'm so happy to hear that when you told me that you were coming over to our side of the operation. Not that there's a side, but we just like to poke fun. How many times have I gotten on a hotel van with another crew, maybe a 7-3 crew, and they go, "Well, if it's not Boeing, I'm not going."
Not going. Yeah.
It's like,
exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of people out there that really, really believe that. It's a lot of pilots, but anyway.
My favorite is I saw a photo recently of a captain who was in a Airbus A320 operating the flight, and on his old school kit bag, he still had the sticker, "If it ain't Boeing, I'm not going." And people are like, "Wait, what?" Dude, I think you should take that off. Ridicule. Hello. Party of one.
Old school. Yeah.
So good. So you've been having a good time with traveling. You were in Vegas for your volleyball finals, and you've been flying as well. Anything happen on your last trip that was interesting?
Yeah. So the last episode, that was 78, we recorded. I was in Guadalajara, Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And that was also the time when Dallas experienced a round of thunderstorms. So there was a lot of delays and many cancellations. And coincidentally, I ended up canceled in Guadalajara for my next day's flight. So I ended up spending 2 nights, 3 days in Guadalajara, which turned out to be a blessing in disguise because I got to get out and explore the city, which is really beautiful. Never been to Guadalajara. It has some really nice, I guess you'd call it touristy areas, but just a lot of restaurants and shops and a lot of history, with the churches and all the, way older than any U.S. city and city in the United States. So it's just really, really beautiful to be down there, and the culture, and of course the food and the margaritas and the tacos and the carne asada. I mean, all that stuff is just fantastic.
Yeah.
And very, very, what would you call it? Inexpensive, $10 for a full meal with drinks.
Yeah. Not only is the exchange rate pretty good, but things are relatively inexpensive. It's wonderful.
Very enjoyable.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
it's easy to get around the city with Ubers and all that stuff. We traveled in 2 Uber. I mean, usually everybody, compact cars and economy cars are the norm out there. So, they show up in a little Toyota Corolla. So 5 of us cram into one car, and the other, 7 people, or 5 or 6 cram into another car. So it's pretty tight quarters when you're traveling. But once you get there, it's awesome. You walk everywhere, and it's just great to be around everybody.
And that leads me to my next question I was going to ask you. Did you venture out on your own or with your captain? It sounds like you went with your entire flight crew.
Yeah, we did. So for lunch, it was just me and the captain because at the time, lunchtime, we weren't sure what our schedule was going to look like because of the delays. It was actually a rolling delay, which is for in layman's term, a rolling delay is just basically they keep pushing the time of our departure back further and further, and the reason for that was the plane hadn't even taken off from Dallas yet.
Mm.
So the inbound flight was stuck in Dallas. They couldn't get to Guadalajara. So we had a rolling delay. And so me and the captain decided to go out just to the restaurant nearby the hotel to get some lunch tacos. So we did that. And after lunch, we kept tracking our departure. And come to find out, it got delayed so far that we ran out of duty day. And we decided to get together with the flight attendants who we were going to fly back with um, or who we were scheduled to fly back with. So we got together with the flight attendants and decided to go downtown and
Yeah.
go explore a little bit and get some dinner. And so we all, got into those Ubers and went downtown, which is great because we rarely get to do that. And that was probably some of the probably the majority of the conversation that we all had at the dinner table and everything is that we rarely get to enjoy an overnight as a crew because of the way the company schedules its overnights. So to take this opportunity, it was very rare, and we got to enjoy everybody's company and hear all the different stories. And it's really great talking to flight attendants too because they get to fly all the different airplanes that we have. They get to go all over the world, where, if you and I, we're just on the Airbus or the 737, we have our routes that we fly. And, once you've been to all the hot spots, you've been there, done that. So,
Right.
you don't get to go to all the other places that the company gets to go to. So it's really cool listening to them and hearing all the stories and, how they can relate, their experiences with what we're experiencing now. And it was just awesome. Great
Yeah.
group of flight attendants, and it's just an all around a great time.
I'm glad you got a chance to experience that. I mean, we've talked about this many times, and even here on the show, is that there was a time, a golden age of aviation,
Yes.
where the crew flew together, had a great time. They would party at these wonderful resort hotels and out by the pool and having all these adult beverages and great meals and those days are, I wouldn't say they're over, but they're few and far between. And now with the FAR-117 that changed the rest requirements for the flight crew, but the flight attendants are still under Part 121 rest requirements. So a lot of times, especially at a mainline carrier, your cabin crew is completely separate on a different schedule than the flight crew. So if you do 3 flights in a day, it's going to be more than likely with a different flight attendant crew every single leg. And then if you're going on a layover or an overnight at the destination, most of the time, even if you're both staying there the night, they're going to one hotel that's usually a short hotel, and you as the flight crew are going to a separate hotel. So even if you're on the same layover, sometimes even for the same amount of duration, you never really get the chance to all hang out as a crew and get to talk about your families and what your interests are. And so that rare occasion now that happens where you actually get to go out together in a group of more than 2 or 3, that's a pretty rare moment.
It is. It really is. Yeah. So we enjoyed it. And the next day, we all had that kind of an early show for departure. And, you could see everybody's just engaging, in conversation with one another, which is kind of rare too, because, you really don't know the other person on a normal flight because, you just met them 30 seconds ago.
Right.
But because we had a little bonding over the dinner, it was nice to be able to just socialize and talk and chat and, just be people.
Yeah.
It was great.
And, that's one thing that, you kind of sparked a memory for me. And I learned this early on in my professional career, not in aviation, but my previous career in retail and in leadership. Um, when you have those bonding experiences with your employee group, that camaraderie, that barrier that is dropped, because you now kind of feel like you know the other person a little bit, and you don't all have to like be kumbaya and in love with each other, but the fact that you've had some kind of personal bonding and a moment in time where you kind of get an idea or a sense that you get to know the other person, you're happier at work. You communicate better. The barriers of communication are dropped, and what that translates into is better customer service, because now, you know, the little things kind of bounce off of you, especially for flight attendants. And that's such a rare occasion where that cockpit door is more than just a security door. It is really a barrier. You keep those pilots in there, keep them in their pen, don't let them. But once you've had that experience, now it's like, hey, can I get you anything? Check on your car. And now if there's something going on in the back, there's a little bit an easier time of getting the word out and getting that communication and really going the extra mile, not just for each other, but for your passengers as well. So
absolutely. Yeah. Cause I mean, I've seen it, or you hear it, cause like when you first meet, hi, I'm first officer, you see your stripes, 3 stripes or whatever, it's first officer Rob DeJesus, and it's Captain John Erickson or something like that. And then, that's kind of the one and only time you're really going to get the names of the people. Then after that, it's the number 1, the number 3, the number 4, or it's captain or the first officer. And, after you have a bonding experience like that, then, really quickly it becomes, hey, let's see if what Rob's doing or what Rob needs, or hey, let's see what John needs, or let's see what Susan needs in the back, or Patty or Rick, so you start using first names, and it becomes more personable, and I think you respond a lot more humanely or appropriately, and it just goes a long way. The human factors point of view is just totally different dynamic when you're on a first name basis and instead of titles and stuff like that. So
exactly. Yeah. It just makes the whole trip more memorable. And, out of the year, you look back, you probably, if you're like me, remember maybe a half a dozen particular trips, and every single time it's either something crazy happened, or you had one of these bonding experience, and you go, man, best layover ever,
Exactly.
So when those moments arise, I highly encourage all of those aviators out there that, if you can, and the opportunity comes up, definitely hang out with your crew, at least give it a moment, because you never know, you might meet somebody interesting enough to develop a friendship. Yep. So what we were going to talk about this episode was some interesting things. And I had a bit of an experience myself last week. I've been flying quite a bit. It kind of did it to myself. I had to move some days around. So I ended up with a 5 days sequence last week, and it ended with a red eye coming back from La Jolla to Los Angeles that was one of the more scarier moments. 5 minutes after pushing out of the gate, starting both engines, running through a checklist. We're going through our flows because it was a relatively short taxi. It was a closed tower airport. So, we're after doing common traffic advisories. It was a maximum takeoff performance on the Airbus, which we're going to get into a little bit later in the show. So it was a pretty stressful situation that happened, and we're going to detail that a little bit later. But that trip, and then I had 1 day off, which was day before yesterday, and then yesterday morning early I had a trip, and I'm in the middle of it right now. Here we are from the beautiful DoubleTree Hotel in downtown Charlotte. I wasn't even supposed to be here today.
I'm not even supposed to be here today.
Fact remains, my original trip, it's another 5 day trip, very similar to the last one, but on this one I was supposed to fly LA, Dallas, Dallas, Puerto Rico last night. And before we even pushed off the gate, Captain looked at me and goes, I don't think we're going to go to Dallas. He goes, I don't think we're going to make it because look at this weather. Then we're watching the radar and looking at the TAF, and we had one alternate, and then before we even pushed off the gate, here we have a revision to our flight plan, and dispatcher calls and goes, I'm giving you more fuel and a second alternate. We're like, oh, this is not looking good. And so we kind of talked about it, and then we got a edict, an estimated departure clearance time prior to even being completed with the boarding process of an hour past our departure time. Wow. So he looks at me, the captain looks at me, and Greg is just awesome guy. I've flown with him many times. Hopefully we can get him on the show because he has a very interesting background. Just a side note, he does horseback archery professionally, and he's amazing. The photos that he does has with him, standing on the back of a horse, bow and an arrow, and hitting these targets while the horse is moving.
That sounds like Braveheart.
That's exactly, that's exactly what it is. I mean, he is amazing, and he's given me some advice on some archery equipment that I have and that I intend to get in the future. But anyway, So I'm flying with Greg, and he's like, yeah, man, this is not looking good. He goes, but what do you want to do? Do you want to just wait here, or shall we push off the gate and maybe they're going to lift this? I think because the storms are kind of moving pretty fast, I think they might lift it and we might get out here earlier. I'm like, dude, let's push off the gate. Let's find a place, shut down the engines, and we can at least kind of keep an eye on it, monitor it. And if they say go, now we don't have to wait 30 minutes to board an aircraft, and then they'll end up, canceling that clearance. So it's better to be ready, I think. And he's like, yeah, I agree.
Absolutely.
So that's what we decided to do. We had a little huddle with the station operations director and the gate agent and the flight attendants, and we all agreed. So we were getting ready to go, and then we got another message from dispatch going, your edict was moved up. It's now in 20 minutes. I said, will you be ready? He's like, yeah, we're all done boarding. Let's go. So we ended up taking off on time. And en route, the same thing. We're looking at our apps. We're checking our radar from WSI. We're checking our radar off of Jeppesen as well, kind of correlating all the information. And of course, we got a reroute, rerouting. So we got a reroute, and then we got a hold. So we're an hour and a half into the flight. We got a hold. So here we are. We're holding, and of course, you know how much pilots love to hold, especially when you're at 35,000 feet, and you're like, where we're gonna hold? Hold as published. I'm like, wait, where's the chart? How do we do this? What's standard? Is it left or is it right? Well, most people are right-handed, so right is standard. That's the way I remember it. Captain's like, I've never heard that. So we're holding, and then of course now they're giving us, they opened it up. They're letting me bring some people in. So here's your reroute. Okay, now the reroute was doing like a fish hook going north of Dallas, coming southbound on the east side of Dallas, and hooking over to land on the east complex because the weather was approaching from the west. We never made that. We got another holding, and then we were holding in the stack. I think it was at 27,000 feet, about 100 miles away, and they were asking us, like, hey, if we give you this arrival, how does that look? Well, let's take a look. And they're like, well, I can give you a heading so you can kind of get a look at it. And Greg looked at me, Captain Greg said, no, let's just do one more turn in the hold. And as we come around, we'll kind of compare the radar. That'll give us time to kind of plug it in and see what it looks like. So after another 2 turns in the hold, they allowed us to proceed, and we ended up landing in Dallas, and it was relatively uneventful. You could tell that the big storm had rolled through, and we ended up landing an hour late. Thankfully, our dispatcher did a good job in planning and giving us the fuel that we needed for all these contingencies. And up until we were on with approach, we were still talking about which alternate was best. It was one of the busiest flights I've done in a while. Wow. And that's the way those flights go. You're constantly calculating fuel. You're constantly calculating weather and routing, and how many
figuring
people
out where you're going to bug out to, and
exactly
and, bingo fuel, and And a lot of times, the biggest factor is especially when you get closer to the weather, is when you have to divert. Sometimes the divert is back through the weather, which is something you don't want to do. and you're trying to avoid the weather altogether anyway. So why would you divert through the weather? So sometimes the alternates that the dispatcher plans on your flight plan is exactly that. It's just a plan. It's something that you legally have to have in writing and calculated out fuel purposes and all that stuff with NOTAMs and everything, just for a plan. But once you get going, your plan may have to change to have the safest course of action. So all the way in, we're like, okay, this is now the next best place to divert to. And even then, you can go on and on with this, your divert location that's on your flight plan may not be the best place to go now because of saturation. They may have already received a lot of divert aircraft. And if you just fly in there and divert in there for gas or whatever, you may overload the station, and then you just create more problems, not only for you, but for the station. So
yeah. How many times did we see that when we were at the Sandpiper? Abilene's your alternate. You land and there's like 15 airplanes and Abilene,
15 aircraft,
one jet bridge.
Gas and, one jet bridge and only like 5 people to work all the airplanes.
Right.
So it's like,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then like you said, it's a planning, it's all about, do I have enough to legally satisfy all the regulations that require me to have an alternate when I need an alternate? The whole 3-2-1 rule, the whole, is it a precision approach or non-precision? How many, So you go through all the regs and all the specs, and now you're legal. But whenever you're planning these things, it's always, do I have enough fuel to go from my departure to my arrival destination? And then from there, shoot an approach, go missed, go to an alternate from your destination airport to your alternate, and then plan on landing with 45 minutes of reserve fuel. Planning on. Now, that doesn't mean you have to have 45 minutes of reserve fuel when you land. It just means that's the way it works out on paper. But like you said, if the weather is between you and the alternate, one, that's not a good alternate, okay? Sometimes that's why you have 2 alternates. But because we were rerouted, we were originally going to go hundreds of miles south of Dallas to come up south of the weather. So we were going to do this southern route to the Gulf of Mexico, make a sharp left turn, and go straight north to Dallas. And our alternate was going to be north. I believe it was somewhere around Little Rock, maybe. And of course, the weather moved in and the south route got closed off, and we ended up having a route going north, which now Little Rock was to the north, and it's okay. I don't have to go through weather to get there. But then by the time we ended up holding west of the airport and then going south again, so Little Rock was not going to work. So we were constantly changing. We're going to go to Austin. No, everybody's going to go to Austin. Well, maybe we can go to Houston. I don't know. Can we? So do we have enough fuel? So it's constant work.
The best close divert point that I learned, it's not a lot of legacy guys know this.
Oh, it's a secret.
Fort Hood, Killeen, Texas.
Killeen, Texas. Okay, don't tell anybody.
Killeen, Texas. Go there.
Yeah. Do they have long runways? Are they good?
10,000-foot long runway.
Oh, yeah, score.
And it's a Eagle station. So they just come out there with air stairs and a fuel truck, and you're in and out in like 30 minutes.
Nice.
Kind of like a quick turn at Sandpiper.
Yep, I got to write this down.
Awesome, because nobody goes there, because everybody's going to, Austin, San Antonio, Oklahoma City, Tulsa.
Yep.
Yep.
Perfect.
It's probably a legal refueling point
for the aircraft you're on.
For the Airbus.
Yeah. We'll have to check that, but yep. So that's why I ended up in Charlotte. Well, I didn't really explain. Why did I not go to Puerto Rico? Well, because like you said, I timed out. We overblocked by over an hour, making it illegal for FAR 117 with flight duty time restrictions to go. Yeah. So they pulled the pilots off of the Charlotte flight, put them on the Puerto Rico flight, and now here I am in Charlotte. But it gets better because my captain's not with me. My captain went to the short layover hotel, and I came to the long layover hotel. Why? Because he deadheaded to Phoenix this morning at 8 o'clock this morning, and I'm here until 8 o'clock tonight because I'm flying to Phoenix at 8 o'clock tonight, where I'm actually flying the leg. So then when I get to Phoenix, he will have been downtown at the long layover having a good time and probably having some tacos and margaritas himself, and I will have been flying and I do the short layover. So yeah, we're going to end up meeting at the airport for tomorrow evening's flight to Maui. So
nice.
Yeah, sometimes, they split you up because the needs of the company come before the needs of the crew. And
that's right.
That's why I'm here.
That's it. You got to be flexible, and changes will happen. And sometimes, you just need to remain flexible in your schedule and your thought process, and be ready to just adapt and overcome.
Yeah.
And hopefully by the fifth day, you'll be home.
Yeah. Well, I've learned early on, the way I figure it is, sometimes you make plans and you get disappointed when those plans change. And for some people, their personality is not unlike my own. I don't like surprises. I like to have things kind of planned out. So, I brought particular outfits for overnights and weather. This time of year, it's not too bad. It's warm everywhere. But, if you end up in subarctic temperature and all you have are board shorts and flip-flops, that could be a problem.
Yeah.
So, I kind of roll with it because I figure from the moment I sign in for my trip to the moment I'm supposed to be, done, as long as you give me a warm bed and night and, don't overwork me too much, that's fine. Yeah. The needs of the company. I get it.
Yeah. But take, for example, the intro, when I gave you the story about my Guadalajara experience, that was only supposed to be a 2-day trip for me. So spending 3 days was, right into my days off. So, but, being with experience, you realize, you pack, you're going on a 2-day trip, you pack for 3 just in case, especially if, there's weather coming. So, 4 days, I always have enough stuff for minimum 4, maybe 5.
Yeah.
Just in case something happens.
Well, you got to wear, if you run out, you can wear your underwear inside out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's why I wear the tagless one so that it doesn't matter which way it goes. The tag's always... Just kidding. All right, moving on.
So what I wanted to talk about today was something that recently, for whatever reason, came up. And I had a conversation with someone about what noise abatement procedures are. Now, when you're flying general aviation, noise abatement procedures could be relatively minor, like, fly certain heading and avoid the golf course or avoid a housing development because of the noise that your aircraft makes. So you have to, the airport will have a charted noise abatement procedure. Usually, what is that, on the back of the 10-9 or somewhere around there, they usually have an ODP procedure.
Officer departure.
Yep. So usually a noise abatement procedure is defined there or maybe in an extra page. However, when you're flying jet aircraft or airlines or corporate jets, there's usually a procedure for you that may not be charted, and you'll just see something like a sign on the taxi out that says all jet aircraft must follow NADP1 procedures. And you look at each other and go, what's that? And this happened to us about a year and a half ago. At that particular trip, I remember I was flying with actually one of our previous featured guests. And it was actually Captain Ash, who I was flying with. And I think we were in Austin, if my memory serves me correctly. And taxiing out in Austin from the terminal to, I believe it was 36 left, and taxiing on taxiway Charlie. And we were going through our flow procedures, and there's a point where the first officer has his head and eyes in the cockpit because the captain's doing the flight control check. And the captain, his eyes are outside because it's usually during a taxi period, especially in VFR. There's no reason to stop the airplane to do this. It was a long taxi, so he's taxiing the airplane and he's manipulating the flight controls, and I have my responses, full up, full down, full left, full right. And so my eyes are really in the cockpit, but something caught my eye. Something in my peripheral caught my eye. It was a big yellow sign. It was right there on the right side of the taxiway. And it said, all jet aircraft must follow NADP 1 procedures. And I go, huh. And of course, that raised the little red flag in my captain's ear. And he goes, wait, what? And I'm like, well, let's finish the checklist. And I'll okay. So we finished the checklist. And I said, I saw a sign back there that said all jet aircraft must follow NADP 1 procedures. He's like, really? So we immediately looked into our company ops pages of our Jeppesen app. And that's where the company has all the procedures that they want you to follow for whatever particular aircraft you're in, or potentially just general procedures that they want you to follow. Las Vegas is one such airport where if you're departing in Las Vegas, it used to be all jet aircraft had to follow a very specific NADP 1 procedure that the company had outlined, where your thrust reduction altitude was much higher than usual. It's actually double. I believe it was 3,000 feet over the field instead of the 1,500 or 1,000, depending on the procedure. So you had to follow this particular procedure. Now in Las Vegas, that only applies on particular departures. Actually, I think just one departure that requires this special procedure. So we both kind of looked at each other and said, well, I don't see anything in the company flight ops pages indicating that there's anything other than the standard procedure, the normal noise abatement procedure, which is NADP 2, which has a thrust reduction of 1,000 feet above field level. So once you reach 1,000 feet above field level, you go from your takeoff thrust setting to your climb thrust setting. And in our case on the Airbus, it's either going to be set toga or set flex. Flex being the reduced thrust takeoff, which is what we try to do almost every single time because it reduces the engine wear and puts less stress on all the components associated with it.
Yeah. Real quick, let's make sure the listeners understand. When we depart airports, 9 times out of 10, we're not using 100% thrust from the engine. We're using a reduced thrust setting because, number one, depending on our weight and runway lengths and obstacles and departure corridor of the airport, we don't need to have 100% thrust to get off the runway. We can use 80% or 90%, depending on what the performance calculations are. So what Av8rTony's referring to is basically we'll use that reduced thrust to conserve fuel, wear and tear on the engine, and also noise. We just don't need to, make all that noise on takeoff every single time.
Right.
So continue.
Yes, thank you. And so that's what the whole thrust reduction takeoff or the reduced thrust takeoff is. Now, if you're dealing with noise abatement, meaning there are residential communities around the airport, what you would think would be quieter is just to do a reduced thrust takeoff and then get the heck out of there. But that's not necessarily the case. What the studies have found over the years is that the more altitude the aircraft has closer into the airport, then when it reduces thrust, it's higher up and closer into the airport before it reduces that thrust. And therefore, as it's climbing out, it's quieter.
Yeah,
okay?
Exactly.
And if there's an engineer that can explain this a little bit more technically, then by all means, send us an audio feedback. But so I saw this on the taxi out, and the captain goes, well, I didn't see that sign, and I don't see anything here. So I not that I don't believe you, but I mean, what's going on? So as we were taxiing, as we got closer to the last 500 feet of the taxiway before holding short of the departure or the hold short line, At the threshold, there was another sign. Same thing.
Yeah.
All jets must use NADP1 procedures. And the captain goes, oh, okay. So he immediately goes down into the what we call the FMGC, or the display panel for the flight management system. And he immediately goes into the performance page and changes it from thrust reduction and acceleration altitude to 1,500 feet instead of 1,000 feet above field level. And I was like, whoa, what, how did you know to do that? I mean, because I know Vegas says, it's 3,000 feet. And he goes, oh, well, let's take off. And then, he goes, we're not going to hurt anything by doing this. Let's just take off and we'll look for it where it says in the manuals. And most of that flight, we were looking for it, and we couldn't find it.
Oh, really?
But we finally did. And where we found it is in a place that most professional pilots, even to this day, have a hard time finding anything in there. Because in the old days, when we had kit bags with paper manuals, we usually had 3 fat binders. All right, the brown Jeppesen binders, right? 2 of them were our JEP charts, where we had all our approaches and arrivals and all that stuff. And then the 3rd binder was the Airways manual. And this had all the airport, what the signs mean at the airport, all the rules for departures and holdings. And I mean, it's basically like how to fly, but just not for dummies. I mean, this is a very, very technical, very, compacted information into a pretty small space. So we ended up finding it. And the way we found it was we went through a button on our EFB in the JEP app called Pubs, Publications. Okay. From there, we ended up clicking on the Airway Manual tab. We found the General tab, and we started scrolling through it. Now, the pain in the arse with this is that there is no search feature in the Jeppesen app.
Right.
That we found, at least.
Would be nice, but no.
Would be nice. So, because we knew we were going to talk about this today, last night, I decided to find that page. Ladies and gentlemen, that's on page 1094, where it starts talking about noise abatement procedures. It's document 8168. And on a little bit further down, on page 1102, it talks about NADP 1 or A and NADP 2 or B. So let's talk about it.
Okay. Crazy thing is I'm trying to find it right now and I'm having a hard time.
So are you on your pubs?
Yeah.
Go back to the publications, click on company manuals.
Company manuals, check.
Click on Jeppesen Airway Manual General.
General, check. Oh, okay.
And then now
find all the way to
scroll up one page, and then you'll see the little cursor on the right. Tap on the cursor on the right until it gets big. And then you can use it as a scroll bar.
Got it. 194.
And then 1104. Pretty sensitive.
Yeah, no kidding.
So when you get
194,
1102 is
1102. Okay.
Yeah, that's the.
All right.
So 1094 is where the flight procedures document 8168 noise abatement procedures starts. This is extracted from the ICAO document 8168. So what is ICAO? The International Civil Aviation Association. This is kind of like the international version of the FARs or the AIM. Okay. And so what they're talking about here is what noise abatement is. It gives definitions. It gives the noise preferential runway routes information. So it really just explains why these procedures are in effect and when to use them. Talks about weather, talks about obstacles, and the type of aircraft that would follow these procedures. As we mentioned, currently on this, whatever revision is here as of today, page 1102 is entitled Flight Procedures for Noise Abatement, and it talks about Procedure A and B. So Procedure A talks about when you take off, from takeoff to 450 meters. in other words, 1,500 feet above aerodrome elevation, that's when you would use takeoff power and takeoff flaps. You would climb at V2 plus 20 to 40 kilometers per hour, which is V2 plus 10 knots to V2 plus 20 knots, or as limited by the body angle. At 450 meters or 1,500 feet, then you would do a reduced thrust to not less than climb power thrust. And you would climb out at V2 plus 10 to 20 knots. Then at 3,000 feet, you would accelerate smoothly to your en route climb speed with flap retraction on schedule. And they even have a beautiful little graph here. So this is not what we normally do.
No.
NADP-A or NADP-1, depending on your company's definition of it, is a procedure that is non-standard. And it is for noise abatement. And when you look at the graph, you can see what you're doing is you're climbing almost like VX and VY in general aviation. You're climbing out basically at like VX, right? So you're getting altitude as fast as possible with a lower ground speed, and therefore you're getting higher, less distance away from the airport. That way, when you finally get to flap retraction speed, you're not as far away from the airport.
And you're higher.
And you're higher, right? So you're not making as much noise down low.
Right.
NADP-B procedures, or NADP-2, depending on your company, is also on that page, and it explains that this is the normal noise abatement procedure, and it would be takeoff thrust to 1,000 feet above aerodrome elevation and takeoff flaps and whatnot, and the climb and the V speeds. So it kind of talks about it. It also says that for high bypass ratio engines, reduce to normal climb thrust after 1,000 feet.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that Captain Ash looked at the sign and within 1 second was like, oh, let me just change that on here. Now, this could change depending on the company's particular procedure for that particular airport and that particular aircraft. Mm-hmm. It could be from 1,000 feet to 3,000 feet for normal, and it could be 1,500 feet to 3,500 feet for, or 1,500 feet to 3,000 feet for the NADP-A.
Right.
Now that you've heard all this technical jargon, and we're probably got crickets going on here for most of our listeners, why does this matter? Well, we've been talking about noise and noisy walkarounds and noisy cockpits and how, this loud noises and the volume inside airports is very fatiguing and all these things, and wear ear protection. And we were kind of on a roll with this, and we're still moving strong, but thought we'd talk about the noise abatement procedures a little bit as well. Hopefully all of you have gotten at least some kind of knowledge out of it.
Yeah. And also, if you want to be friendly neighbors to your airport neighbors, you know what I mean? If you're flying in and out of these airports, one of the biggest problems with airports and communities is noise. A lot of communities that live around airports really, really object to, the aircraft flying over their houses and stuff just because of the noise. If we can reduce the noise, we can become better or more friendlier in their eyes, and hopefully not generate so many noise complaints. So these procedures are all implemented at noise sensitive area airports so that we can become better neighbors and friendlier operators at these airports. John Wayne's Orange County Airport is another popular noise abatement area where we have to use those exact procedures as you talked about to, leave the runway, get as high and as fast as we can, and then we'll have our thrust reduction. And a lot of passengers that have never experienced that before, sometimes it's startling to them because they think that the engines just quit because of the amount of thrust reduction, especially on our airplane. I mean, it's very, very aggressive as far as the power and the rotation, the deck angle. And then once we get to our 3,000 feet, we have that thrust reduction, and that's when we start retracting the flaps. So the engines come back, the noise, the decibel levels go way down, and then you almost have that sinking feeling or like falling out of the sky feeling because of the deck angle changing, as well as the flaps, flaps retracting. So everything, you're going from an extreme angle and the climb and the acceleration with the ascent, and then pretty much leveling off. So you have that feeling, and then the flaps retracting, and there's a sensation that's always associated with the flaps retracting, and then the power reduction. It's quite aggressive, and it's not normal. And so sometimes your captain will make that PA to the passengers, letting them know, hey, this is what's going to happen. It's not normal, but it's something that we're doing for the procedure, and it's everything's going to be just fine.
Yeah. And, I remember hearing about it, and maybe you can clear it up a little bit. Is it true that the 737 has a specific takeoff thrust rating for Orange County?
That's right. It's a thrust rating that we only use for Orange County, and it's we call it a 27K bump. So normally our normal departures use anywhere from 22, 24, or 26K, or 26,000, 24,000, or 22,000 pounds of thrust per engine for the departure. And then, like we talked about a little bit earlier in the episode, where we use a little bit more reduced thrust from those values, depending on the performance, because John Wayne Orange County Airport is such a noise sensitive area, and the runway is extremely short. We use the maximum thrust available from the engine. So we use this thrust setting that is designed specifically for this situation, and it's 27,000 pounds of thrust, and it's the maximum thrust that these CF 50, what is it? CF 56-7 engines can produce. And it's awesome. It's really cool. And we use our maximum flap setting for takeoff, which is flaps 25. That is, it's the plane just jumps off the runway. I mean, you're accelerating through 120, 130 knots, and you can feel it in the controls. It is light, and you're pretty much going to rotate at that airspeed anyway. But when you rotate and you set the deck angle for the climb out, you're right at or just above 20 degrees deck attitude.
Wow.
On the climb out. And this thing is just accelerating. It just wants to go. It's so much fun. And then at like we talked about, at 3,000 feet, that's where the thrust reduction comes in. And you watch the thrust levers, because the 737, the thrust levers move as opposed to the Airbus. Actually, I think you guys, obviously, now that I'm learning, you have to move it back to whatever MCT or whatever it is.
Yeah, just one click or two clicks.
One click, would be whatever detent you have.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the 737, it's the auto throttles actually move automatically, and you watch them come back from, the firewall right up to the the maximum forward position to, it's about 3/4 of the way back, and you realize, wow, that's a lot of thrust reduction there. And everything gets quiet, and you feel that sensation. Everything's going forward, and like you're almost sinking out of the sky. And then we start retracting the flaps, and the plane's accelerating, and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun for us. But,
there's a secret that, and I have not experienced this yet, but the Airbus, the 321 and some other models as well, a select few models of the Airbus that we have out on the line at Legacy have something called thrust bump. So there's some guarded.
That's probably the CF 56 motors. Maybe.
I believe that they are
the same terminology that we have.
Yeah. So there's some buttons on the thrust levers, and they're guarded. and you're only allowed to use them when directed by the performance numbers and your dispatcher. You're not allowed to use them any other time. Right. Every time you use thrust bump, it does reduce, I think, the life of the engine, and they have to do checks sooner. So you have a limited number of thrust bumps per life of that engine.
Yeah.
So when you're in need for this extra performance, after both engines start, that's very important, you would press one of the thrust bump buttons on the thrust levers, and you would get this extra power. But then that's one hash mark on that engine, your limited number. I've not had the opportunity to do that yet. I've learned about it through training. You're going to learn about it yourself. So the Airbus does have something similar. I don't know this very detailed specifics as you do. While you were talking about that story about Santa Ana, I was looking through our company ops pages, and I did find exactly what you're saying for the 737NG takeoff on runway 2 left or 20 right. And it talks about the 27K and how to do it and how to enter it. And that's really interesting, really cool. And have you had a chance to actually do that takeoff?
Yeah, we did it. I'd have to look back at my schedule, but yeah, we had to do that a couple weeks ago. And
nice.
And it was my leg, and we were the check airmen also. So that made it all that much more fun, because, this is one of the profiles we train in the schoolhouse, which is the landing and departure out of Orange County. Because of the specific performance requirements, they just want to make sure we're getting it right every time, which is something we have to do every time anyway. but because this is such a rarity and in the essence of setting up the FMC and the box and everything like that, and the flap settings, they wanted to make sure we get it right. So just doing it with a check airman was all that much more, I wouldn't say reassuring, but just fun, because you do it with them in the schoolhouse and in the simulator, but now we're out here on the line, and it's like, hey, we've done this many times before in the simulator. Let's do it in real life. And I've done it 3 or 4 times before this year with other pilots, but just being with a check airman was that much more fun. Get to talk about it a lot more and everything like that. But that actually totally irrelevant to the conversation. But it happened to happen. It happened. You can listen to me. It happened to happen.
Happity happen.
It happened with that check airman going into Orange County, where because of the fuel prices we've experienced lately, we had a lot of ferry fuel going into Orange County, right? So when we landed, we had I think 11,000 pounds of ferry fuel on the plane, and we experienced cold soaked fuel frost. So when we landed, the whole underside and the whole top of the wing was frosted. It's like 80 degrees outside, and the wing is just covered in frost. And it was outside of our parameters for being able to depart without having to get de-iced. So luckily, I think we had about an hour and a half, sit time over there, and they came in and they refueled the airplane early. And of course, that warmer fuel getting into the wings and in conjunction with the sun melted all of the frost off the wing. But if we would have had a normal turn, 45 minutes to an hour, it would have been cutting it close. We probably would have had to get the ice out there. So.
And that's interesting. How did you notice that the top of the wing had frost? Because we land very often where we have this scenario, and the bottom of the wing has frost between the engine nacelle and the wing root, and it's acceptable to have up to 1/8 of an inch of frost on the bottom side of the wing for this scenario. Even though it's like 80 degrees outside, you'll get that. Right. How did you know the top of the wing had frost?
Well, so in our manuals, they talk about that cold soaked fuel frost. And in the manual, it says that if you're doing the walk around and you notice frost in this particular situation outside of a certain dipstick. I don't forget the technical term for it, but it's a stick that is in the tank for measuring the fuel quantity in a particular tank. If the normal means is not available, if there's frost outside of that stick, then there's a good possibility that frost will be on top of the wing. And then on the 737, I haven't learned this about the Airbus yet, but on the 737, there's actually some markings on the top side of the wing that is for the cold soak fuel frost. If the frost extends outside of those markings, then it is beyond the limitation of what's acceptable for frost on top of the wing for a cold soak fuel frost. So we're allowed to have cold soak fuel frost for takeoff as long as that frost is inside of that box. But on a cold winter day, if you have frost anywhere, even inside that box, you have to get de-iced.
Different scenario.
So, one of those weird.
That's interesting. I didn't know that about the 7.3. That's and so here's just, you said that there are markings on the wing, and people often don't realize everything, every marking, every sticker, every placard, it has a reason. And if you're ever as a passenger walking to the back of the aircraft, I know Airbus has this. I don't know if the Boeing has this as well. Somewhere around the middle of the aircraft, there's a red triangle over one of the passenger windows. That red triangle is the window that has the best view for the top of the wing, to check the top of the wing for whatever reason, be it frost, snow, de-icing, fuel caps, whatever. So I know the Embraer had that as well. It had a marking over one of the wings, and that was the window that you would look outside. So often back at Sandpiper, when we were de-iced and we were reaching our holdover time, but it stopped precipitating, and sometimes the captain would say, all right, go to the back and check, and I would walk right to that window, and the passengers would look at me like, why is the pilot out of the cockpit? Get back in your hole. And I'd say, sir, can you
looking at the wings?
Can you open up your window shade, please? I need to look outside. And I'd look right out, and I could have the best angle, best view to look outside the window. So if you're a passenger in the back of the plane, you see the little triangle in your row, that's the best view to see the top of the wing.
Yeah, actually, I don't know if that's in a 737. There may be, but that's something that's you use very little. But now that we talked about it, I'm going to see if there is.
See, there it is. Planting the seed, making better.
And now that you talked about it, when I go to training, I'm going to know exactly what that is. Be the smart geek in the classroom.
Okay, so here's a way to win a beer or a dinner or whatever. So you might be flying when you're on IOE or maybe after, and they'll see that you're new on the aircraft, and you'll have a captain ask you, I bet you a beer you don't know how many times the Airbus logo appears on our flight deck. And you'll say, yes, I do.
What?
Because it appears 6 times.
6 times?
Yep. Every rheostat knob has a circular logo. That's the Airbus logo.
Yeah. 6.
So there's 6 rheostats in the cockpit of an A320.
So if he goes, I bet you, I'm going to say, well, what's the bet? Give me something substantial.
Yeah, make it big. I'm like, Look around like, oh God, I don't know the answer to this. What's the bet? Dinner?
I'll probably get this wrong. So what are we betting on? Dinner?
It appears 6 times right here.
I'm just going to guess 6. That's a good one.
We not last show, but a couple shows ago, you and I were talking about how noisy walkarounds can be in our cockpit is, and having a good headset and how it's crucial. And we downloaded some apps, and we've been toying around with the app and trying to figure out how noisy our environment can be as an aviator. And I got a chance to take a couple snapshots here, and I'll post the photos there. I'll put links in the notes as well. On a walk around, on the ramp, with the APU running, the ground equipment all working, belt loaders and tugs running after a landing. Sometimes the brakes get hot. We turn on brake fans. Helps keep them cool. I took a snapshot of 108.4 decibels.
That's pretty damn loud.
That's loud. And I had earplugs in, and I was remembering what you said, how back in the Air Force, you were wearing earplugs on top of the cans on top of earplugs because of the
double ear protection. That's right.
Yeah, and I'm thinking maybe I should get a pair of those neon cans, put them over my ear, and walk around. Look at this pilot. He's, it's like, oh, I'm trying to save my ears.
Yep. Yeah, man. I probably should do that myself, and I don't know why I don't. I'm maybe I just don't want to carry those big things around. Actually, you can get pretty small. They make them smaller. You can fold them up, put them inside your kit bag. But yeah, double earring protection is probably a good idea. I mean, we're only out there for less than 5 minutes normally on the walk around, but 5 minutes 3 or 4 times a day, and then
for 40 years.
40 years.
What?
That's
what?
Let's just say I might have mentioned this before in a previous podcast, but now when I watch some of these movies on my living room TV, it doesn't have any extra sound system. It's just the audio coming out of the flat screen TV, which is not very good to begin with. I have to put on closed captioning to hear or to read what's going on.
I
because
do the same.
Some of these movies, they talk so quietly, or they're talking in an accent that it's just very hard to understand to begin with.
What do you say?
And you miss a lot of detail. And so I put the closed captioning on to enjoy the movie, because other than that, I have the volume at max volume, and then even then I'm asking my wife, what did they say? What do you say? She gets so upset at me because she's like, I don't know, I didn't hear him either.
Yeah, usually it's the other way around. So, it's like they ask me, what did they say? I'm like, don't just read it. You got the closed captioning on.
Yeah.
Like, fine, pause, rewind.
Up here in this room here, I have a little setup with surround sound and everything, and the audio quality is really, really good. So I can watch most of those movies here and enjoy it, because it comes out really crystal clear, and it's a nice quiet. It's not echoey in here, and it's a good setup for a movie. So anyway, that's what 12 years of aviation maintenance outside on a flight line around jet engines, and 17 years on the flight line here at Legacy and Sandpiper will get you with your hearing.
Exactly.
Yep.
So ladies and gentlemen, protect your hearing. I actually was gonna get a headset this week, but my 3-hour layover
turned into 45 minutes.
3-hour sit time in Dallas turned into 45 minutes. So didn't even get a chance to do that. But so this week, I actually earlier in the week, I had that 5-day trip that ended up, as I mentioned on the onset of the show, with a security situation. And I kind of wanted to walk everyone through how that trip started, because it started with a bang as well. So here we are, Los Angeles, boarding an aircraft, getting ready for a early morning departure. It was nice because I could drive to the airport early in the morning.
Where were you headed to?
We were going to do LA to Philadelphia.
Okay.
And then keep the airplane and then fly Philadelphia to Miami. Same day.
Wow.
Weather was good. Long day, but it was doable. We didn't have an aircraft swap. I had enough time to go grab a bite to eat in Philly. It was nice. And it was the first time flying with this captain, and she was great. We had a great time. We hit it off right away. And so here we are, 5 minutes prior to shutting the door, about 15 minutes prior to pushback time. And we're running through the route verification in the FMGC. And all of a sudden we get ding, 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 LAV SMOKE. And these things happen. It did not really kind of catch either one of us off guard. We both looked at each other like, someone's vaping in the bathroom again, but let's check, So they're boarding. So the flight attendants are kind of at their stations. The aircraft aisle is completely full. People are boarding the aircraft. And the number one flight attendant says, "What's that noise?" Because she heard the very alarming, very loud fire bell. And we're like, LAV SMOKE, check the lavs. And meanwhile, we go, okay, LAV SMOKE, I stand up so I can kind of look over everybody's head from the flight deck, look to the back of the airplane and see if I can if I noticed that there's a light on the outside of the lab, the indicator that, and I knew that there was no one in the first class lavatory because it was unoccupied.
Vacant.
And so I'm like, I think it's the mid galley. So she the flight attendant picks up her handset, does an all call, and says, someone's either smoking in the lab or, we need to check all the labs. So, of course, the mid galley lab, there was no one standing right there because the flight attendant that was in that general area was helping a passenger to their seat. And there was no way to swim upstream to get to it. And the girls in the aft were checking those labs and like, there's nobody in here. And so we kind of looked at each other and I said, just have her check the lab thoroughly because I think it's the mid galley. And I think, they have to check the garbage can and all the indicators in the lab. And of course, by the time she got there was no one in the lab and she checked the lab. It was fine. So someone either did a quick puff of an e-cigarette or a vape or used the lab and then sprayed something, cologne or, some kind of air freshener. That's a no-no.
Aerosol.
Do not spray aerosols in an airport lavatory because they will set off the smoke alarm. So, there's nothing we could do. We kind of searched the area,
I believe there are also prohibited items, anything aerosol
that
on
is
an airplane.
Correct. How they get through security, I don't know. But what have you. And the funny thing is, I was immediately reminded 2 weeks ago when we were mid-flight and the mid-lab LAV smoke, fire alarm went off. And the flight attendant knocked on the door and out came this 20-something-year-old girl, all red in the face. And she goes, I wasn't smoking. I swear. I don't even smoke. And she's like, well, what caused the fire alarm to go off? She goes, oh, I'm so embarrassed. She's like, well, you got to tell me, what did you do in there? And she's like, I sprayed some Burberry cologne.
Potpourri. Cologne.
Burberry, whatever, perfume, which is, a relatively pricey perfume. She's like, you can't spray perfume. She's like, I just had a little Burberry spray because I used the bathroom. I'm so embarrassed, and so I felt bad for her, but the captain that I was flying with during that trip said, I need her name, I need her seat number, and I need to know exactly what happened. And the flight attendant's like, nah, she was embarrassed. It was no big. He goes, no, you don't understand. Now, anytime we get a smoke indication in the lab, it records it. It sends it to SOC, Systems Operation Control. Before we even land, they already know. They already know this happened.
Yeah.
It's 5 minutes ago. They already know it happened. We don't even land yet. So we need to have, they're going to want me to submit a report of what happened because we're trying to track these things more now because we've had too many of these
hot
things
topics,
happen. Right. So she was like, oh, am I in trouble? And she's like, no, you're not in trouble, sweetie. You're just, we just have to write a report because it went off and it's an alarm. We had, just don't spray anything in the lab anymore. So
lesson learned,
right? So don't do Banaka. No, not a good thing. So flashback. So that happened a couple of weeks ago. This happened here, and we're like, well, okay, we didn't know who. Nobody fessed up, so continue. But we landed in Philadelphia. As I mentioned, I got a bite to eat. Got an all new flight attendant crew.
You had a Philly cheesesteak?
No, I stayed away from that. So we ended up. Actually, I got. If you must know, I got a beautiful dragon roll sushi.
Oh, cool.
Just saying. So yeah, about 5 minutes prior to shutting the door, about 15 minutes prior to pushback, we get ding, 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 LAV smoke.
No.
And we're like, oh crap, same airplane. What's the coincidence of this? Which lab did it come from? And we determined that it was from the mid galley lab.
Again.
See, and I was thinking about that. Why? This time, a little bit different. The guy came out in a puff of smoke. And the flight attendant was standing right there. And she's like, sir, what are you doing? And he's like, what? She goes, you cannot vape in there. I wasn't vaping.
Right? Plausible deniability.
As it comes out in a puff of like theatrical smoke. Like I wasn't
with the
vaping.
Alarm sounding and everything.
Ding, 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 right?
I didn't do it.
And so the purser tells us, yeah, she caught him. He was vaping. He denies it. He lied to her. He's off.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, hey, would you rather have the what is it, $20,000 fine or $25,000 fine, or just get kicked off the airplane
and take a next plane?
So, but that's not up to us. So we called for the ground security coordinator to come down. She was there immediately, and she was like, "What's going on?" He was vaping in the mid galley. You might want to talk to him. So she goes back there and goes, "You were vaping in there?" He's like, "Oh, no, I wasn't vaping." And while his vape stick is right there in his backpack, which he had on his shoulder because he knew it was coming. And he's like, "Why? Is that wrong?" He's like, "You just said you weren't. Why did you ask if it was wrong?" So yeah, he was asked to leave the aircraft, and we looked at each other and go, "Man, 2 in a row at the same time, same galley area." And I think what happens is the passengers get on the plane, and they're like, "I just need one puff before we go," and this looks
like a great place to go.
They know that they're like, maybe the flight attendant's not anywhere in the mid galley LAV or the mid LAV, because they're usually congregate in the back to view the boarding, or they're in the first class galley handing out the little sanitation wipes, right?
And I was going to say, and we know none of our passengers read any of the signs or placards that are all over the airplane, especially in the lavatory where there's cigarettes with big crosshairs all
even
over
pictures, right?
You can't do it. Yeah.
What? Is that wrong?
Wow.
So yeah, this is how the trip started. 2 in a row, but hey, whatever. We ended up in Philly, and then we ended up in Miami, and Miami was nice. We got a nice dinner. I got some. What did I have? I went to the Daily Catch, I think is the name of the restaurant down there just south of the airport. Yeah, real cool place. It's open. We got to sit down and have a civilized meal. Nice. And then the next day, we proceeded on to Phoenix. And nothing really to talk about. We did a Miami to Cancun, Cancun to Phoenix. Relatively short layover in Phoenix. Again, grabbed a decent meal with my captain. And then we were off to La Hui the next day. Boy. Phoenix to La Hui on day 3. Nice layover in La Hui. I got a beautiful run in, all the typical stuff that you would think. I didn't really hang out much because I tried to stick to my limited quarantine that we have for Hawaii. But I did get some good meals, and that I went to go grab food and brought it back to the hotel. It was nice. And here's where the adventure began. I got my afternoon nap in, got all ready to go. We departed La Hui. Originally, it was supposed to be a 10:30 departure, and everything was relatively quiet, just a typical evening. There was some rain showers that were blowing through, and what got the ball rolling was we were talking about it on the drive over. La Hui Airport Tower closes at 10 p.m. local time, so it was going to be an uncontrolled, non-towered airport, and so even though we are a CPDLC, the La Hui Airport doesn't have the facilities to manipulate the CPDLC on the ground. And so we had to do all the things that you would do at a general aviation airport with no tower. You had to do common traffic advisories. It's at night, so you're going to have to go and get your AWOS or ASOS. You're going to have to do pilot controlled airport lighting. You're going to have to get your clearance from HCF, which is Honolulu Control Facility, which is their version of ATC. And so you have to get your clearance usually 5 minutes prior to departure. So you're already taxiing out when you pick up your clearance. Then you get a hold for release, all these things. You have to request your altitude. You're doing a transoceanic flight crossing, so you have to request particular altitudes. Now, at that particular time, we had 5 airplanes all pushing off the gate around the same time in La Hui. Alaska, United, 2 Americans. One was going to Phoenix, one was going to LA, which was us. Well, we were the last ones. So we didn't even get the altitude we wanted. We wanted a higher altitude. It just wasn't available. On that particular day, we were going to be doing what they call the Delta track. And if you look at a Pacific Ocean oceanic crossing chart, you'll see these tracks, these basically straight highways, Alpha track, Bravo track, and so on and so forth. And we were on the Delta track, and the controller said, hey, the altitude you requested is not available on the Delta track. To say that we had a lot going on for a particular flight is pretty accurate. And it was relatively uneventful pushback. We started up both engines because it's a relatively short taxi, and we wanted both eyes out during the short taxi, and we're taking off at night, and it had just finished raining, and it was a maximum performance takeoff, which is a flaps 3, toga power, and APU on. So why APU on? For those that don't know, the auxiliary power unit is what powers the aircraft and supplies bleed air to the pack system, or the air conditioning and heating system, so that when you're on the ground and the engines are not running, the aircraft has power and air. And that air is also what starts the engines. That bleed air is what starts the turbines rotating, turning, and then get the engine started. So it's relatively a completely self-controlled, self-contained procedure here to get the airplane going. So when you have a takeoff that you're manipulating APU bleed air to control the packs and pressurization system, what you're doing is you're not bleeding air off of the engines, which then gives that engine, or those engines, all that more available thrust, because you're not tapping any energy out of it. Same thing goes with, other factors and situations on the accessories that the engines power. So it's a maximum takeoff performance. And again, it's because of a short runway, as we discussed with your Santa Ana, short runway maximum takeoff. Now, the Neos, which is what we're flying out there now, don't have this thrust bump thing. It's just not necessary, I guess. So this is what we were prepared for.
The Neos have the Leap 1 motors in it?
Leap 1A, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So we were all, our minds were, very much focused on what we needed to do and following all the sequential factors to get this airplane in the air safely, on course, and communicating with ATC.
Right.
And we had already received our clearance, got the engine started. We just finished doing the flight control check. We're going through our flows, and all of a sudden we hear rattling coming from the first class galley. Now, this is a sound that you don't hear very often. If they drop a tray or a bag cart gets moved, that's very specific. It's a tunk sound. This was people yelling and...
Oh, man.
And in that split moment, we had not moved the aircraft yet, and both the captain and I looked at each other, and we've been flying together now for 4 days. So we've had those experiences, as you did in Guadalajara, where we hung out together, we got a meal together, we found out about each other's families and whatnot. So I felt very comfortable. I looked at her and I was like, what the heck is that? And she's like, oh God, it sounds like a fight. And just then we get the from the galley, and it's the call from the number one flight attendant. And she holds up the receiver, and all we hear are people yelling and fighing.
Yeah.
And she says, there's a fight back here. We need to go back to the gate now. Call the cops. Call the cops. They're fighting. This guy he's trying to open the L1 door. And that, like, every alarm in our heads, like, went off. And we just were, all of a sudden, we were that moment in time, that human factor of what the heck is going on disappeared. Mm-hmm. And we were both extremely focused. She's like, I'm going back to the gate. Call ops. Let's get the police out here right now. So here I am now dialing an ops frequency, because I'm already prepared to talk to ATC. I'm like one step ahead of everything, trying to get us up in the air. So I'm dialing back into the ops frequency, and I call, and I said, and they heard it in my voice. I was like, Lahui Ops, this is, Legacy so-and-so. We are returning to gate 4 immediately. Call the police. We have a fight in the cabin. Call the police. Give me an ETA when you know. And so she's already moving the airplane forward. The rampers came running out of the building. They parked us. The jet bridge driver's moving the jet bridge. And we're sitting there, the parking brake is set, the captain opens the window and yells out the window to the jet bridge driver, wait until the police are here. Because what we were afraid that was, because we heard everything that was going on, because the number one flight attendant did a sensational job and left the mic open.
Nice.
And we heard everything. What had ended up happening was, and I'm not going to give you too much detail for privacy purposes, but a passenger that was in the back of the aircraft during the final walkthrough suddenly got up, yelled, "I need off this plane now, my daughter. I need to get off this plane now. I need to get off." And he ran from the last row of the aircraft to the front of the aircraft. "I need to get off this plane now." He shoved one of the flight attendants that tried to stop him to the ground. 4 able-bodied passengers got up to try to just get him to stop. He made it all the way to the first class galley with 4 men holding him back. That's how strong this small person was. He wasn't a big guy.
Yeah.
And they all jumped on top of him. He was trying to open the door of the aircraft, which would have then, with engines running, with the slides would have been deployed. Not a good situation. Yeah. So he's completely lost it. And we could hear all this happening, and the flight attendant's like speaking into the mic, like exactly what's happening. And so she tells the jet bridge driver, "Wait till the cops get here, because we're afraid that this was going to spill out and somebody was going to get injured." Because we heard the zip ties going on him. This passenger was restrained at that point.
Wow.
Okay. The police showed up within 60 seconds.
Nice.
So, we shut down the engines, we go through the checklist. And, at one point, my captain gets up to look through the peephole. And I'm like, we're under lockdown.
Don't open that door.
Whatever you do. And she's like, "I'm just going to look through the peephole." I'm like, "Oh, okay." Okay. So she's looking through the peephole, and she could see the number of bodies just piling up on top of this person. And
chaos. Sure.
And that at that point, the adrenaline is pumping, the heart's pumping. You're like, what? I'm looking like, where's the crash axe? I'm ready. I'm going to defend this cockpit. No one's coming in here, right?
Right.
So once the police came and they gave they arrested this individual. They gave the all clear. Come to find out that one of the able-bodied passengers, or ABPs, was actually bit in the arm.
Oh no!
Broke skin. Yeah, very, very unfortunate event. Now, I don't know what happened to this individual. I don't know if drugs were involved or not. That's not for me to say. The point of me telling this story is that you never know at the blink of an eye what could happen.
So true.
And we sat there a good 30 minutes after we were parked at the gate. Passengers were informed of what was going on. Yeah. We had interviews to conduct with the police department. The flight attendants were interviewed. The passengers were interviewed. One passenger received first aid. Yeah. This individual was clearly disturbed for whatever reason. And I actually feel bad for that person that they had to go through that, and whatever reason. I don't think it was an intentional attack. It was just someone who had to get off the plane and was mentally not prepared to be there.
A phobia or something that kicked in, or who
knows?
You never know. But you know what? This whole thing kind of brought something to my attention, which it's always a concern for me. And luckily, this situation turned out to work out just right for you, which is you had to call the station over the frequency. And not all the time are those frequencies monitored at some of these stations. And that has always been one of my biggest concerns and pet peeves, is when the stations don't monitor the frequency for this exact situation. If there's an emergency and we need to get a hold of them, they're our only lifeline. And especially in your particular case, because there was no ATC facility operating on the field. If you called Hawaii Control Center, it'll take a lot longer for them to relay all your information to anybody of importance, in that area,
Yeah.
which would have delayed the whole thing. But thank God, the Hawaii Lahui ops was there and listening to the frequency. And it's happened at a number of our stations where you call for, whatever operational reason, whether it's just you need seatbelt extenders or another, safety briefing card or something like that, and there's nobody answering.
Yeah.
And you're like, man, what if I had a passenger disturbance or something going on and you need to get a hold of somebody to help? There's nobody there to help you.
Yeah.
And that just adds to the problem and the anxiety and the stress. So wow, sounds like you did a great job.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Nice
I
job.
appreciated how everybody really stayed calm. All the employees stayed calm. It was very stressful. There were a couple other little wrenches thrown into the machine, into the cogs.
Sure.
We got back to the gate and we ended up with the maintenance item. Because we pushed off the gate and a maintenance item came up, then they had to do another ETOPS verification. So contract maintenance who happened to be there. We were the last flight of the night. So like you mentioned, those employees could have been clocking out, going home. We were very lucky it happened when it did. We're very lucky it happened on the ground.
Sure.
Once airborne, you're not going back to Lahui. You're going to another airport, probably Honolulu. Like that, So there's another 30 minutes of struggling that
dealing
might
with the
happen,
situation.
Right? Now, we joked afterwards. We're like, I looked at the captain after we kind of all got settled. We actually ended up pushing off the gate again the second time, about 50 minutes behind schedule. So not bad. Not bad at all. Good. And she did a phenomenal job giving the customers information of what was going on and kind of like bringing everybody, calming everyone down with what happened by giving them just the facts of what has happened and what we're going to do. And everybody kind of like people got up, but nobody really panicked about the whole situation. Nobody said, "Oh, I went off this plane," which sometimes happens when there's a disturbance.
Sure.
But yeah, we ended up doing our, hold for release. We ended up doing the toga takeoff with the APU running in a flaps 3 departure. Wow. Got en route. And once we got up to altitude, I said, thank God that happened on the ground and not in the air, or better yet, in the air at 12 o'clock in the morning over the ocean with 3 hours or 2 hours to get back to wherever you're nowhere to go. Turn around, go back to Honolulu or something. And she's like, she goes, but if it would have happened like right at departure time, we would have diverted to Honolulu and then we would have been done because we're only legal for one leg doing these trips. We could have had another night in Honolulu. I was like, that's one way of looking at it. Yeah, sure.
On the brighter side.
Always look on the bright side, But
I don't know if you noticed though, along the same lines of what you're talking about, there's been an uptick in the industry lately with disturbances on aircraft, mostly pertaining to the wearing of masks. I've seen a couple of social media posts where passengers are getting removed for whatever reason. Most of them are because they aren't wearing masks. And the FAA, is it the FAA or
the FAA and the NTSB both have put regulations out?
Yeah, regulation, or I'm not sure if it's a regulation, but it's a presidential order, maybe. But anyway, it's being enforced by the FAA and the TSA. They have to wear masks not only on the airports but in the airplanes during the boarding, throughout the flight, and when you deplane.
Yes, and our captains have to read that mandatory PA now too. Yeah. Mandatory
PA. And I've seen on one of the news articles recently, which I should probably dig it up and send it to you, where they're going to the FAA is imposing a fine on one of the individuals that was removed for the disturbance of not wearing a mask. I think it's like $50,000. So they're actually going to go through with it. So folks, please wear your masks still, even though the CDC came out a few days ago and said, hey, if you're fully vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask. You can socialize and be less than 6 feet apart. all that stuff, which it's a free world. You can do whatever you want. But when you're in an airplane, we're in an airport. It's something we all have to do. Just cooperate and graduate. Sooner or later, this whole thing will be done with. But for now, airplanes, airports, wear a mask. We all do it. Just do it. Just do it. Just do it.
It's,
Please.
I totally get it. Hey, we don't have to wear the mask. The CDC says if we've been fully vaccinated, we don't have to wear the mask. But according to all the powers that be, you still have to wear the mask, like Rob said, on the airplane and at the airport. And the mandatory PA that the captains have to read before every flight is tedious. And it's because it's, it's something that we have to do. It's the same script. And so what I've recommended to the captains is that they use a feature in the My Comply. Yeah. And so by using this feature, instead of having to read the same PA over and over again, or some of them make it unique in their own, you can just press this button right here that says speak.
Even though the CDC has issued new guidelines for fully vaccinated individuals, federal law still requires each person age 2 and older to wear a mask that covers their nose and mouth at all times during the flight, including boarding and deplaning. Refusing to wear a mask properly is a violation of federal law and may result in denial of boarding, removal from the aircraft, and/or financial penalties under federal law. Thank you for your cooperation, and please contact your flight attendants if you have any questions.
So I highly recommend
that's awesome.
Having that in your phone.
AI.
And just be like, and
artificial
the following is a required announcement.
I was going to say it'd be funny if you could change the accent of the AI, of the artificial intelligence, to like, a German accent or a Russian accent or something.
Well, you
Chinese accent.
You could.
That'd be awesome.
So take that script, put it in your iPhone, change the Siri voice. To one of the selectable accents. I think there's a British voice in there or something else. And then say, Siri, read this document, and it'll read it. And I don't know. Yeah. I'm just saying, cool. It's legal.
One crew member, one captain that I saw, he actually recorded a voice memo of that PA into his phone. And then what he does for the PA is he'll actually just play that voice recording from his phone into the microphone as a PA. And he just sits there, he looks at me and he smiles and he's like, this is easy for me because I don't have to read it every time.
Right.
And so I thought that was,
maybe
a clever, ingenious way to do that.
Maybe I should work on my voiceover acting and record a couple and sell them to captains around.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, exactly.
Your attention, please.
That sounds pretty good. You've been working at Disneyland?
Keep your hands and feet inside the airplane at all times.
Señores y señoras, férmenes sentados.
No smoking in the lavatories.
Yeah,
Keep
no
your
vaping.
masks on. And if you're going to have a freak out moment, now's a good time. Oh, jeez.
Well, I tell you what, Rob, this has been a good show. I like talking about these events that have happened and transitioning that into scenarios and facts about our profession. I know we talked about the journey of today's aviator, and that's primarily what we do here at Squawk Ident. But I really do like these shows that we do together, where we talk about
me too,
the stuff that's going on behind the scenes, behind the curtain.
It's current events for us. It's these things we talk about are I don't know how to put it. They're normal, but they're not normal. Things you've experienced and you've read about, you heard other people talk about. And it makes you an all around better person, better aviator. You talk about this in public with other people, and you come up with better ways to handle things, or you find out things in your ops manual that you didn't know even existed.
Yeah.
So, or for our case, the Jeppesen airway manual.
Yeah, page 1102.
Yeah, that's what makes it fun. You realize that All your manuals are there for a reason. You know, some things were written in blood, unfortunately, and they're there for safety, security, and it's fun to talk about. Surely is. That's
Yeah.
what makes this. That's what makes this career a fun career. There's always something new.
Yeah, and like Andy said in the last show, actually, you know, always moving, looking forward, looking ahead at what's next, and understanding that there's always a better way to do something. There's always a better technique,
Absolutely.
you know. And I believe I said to him during the last show that, yeah, the day I stop learning is the day I'm going to hang it up, and because. You know, it'll get boring if just doing the same thing over and over again, reading the same PA over and over again gets boring, you know. But yeah, always finding a new way of doing something is really
Definitely
the way to do it. Well, I just want to say thank you for listening to the show. Thank you to all the frontline workers, doctors, nurses, pharmacists, EMTs, medical techs, firefighters, law enforcement, grocery store employees, truck drivers, bus drivers, Amazon workers, Uber, Lyft drivers, and of course, all the airline and airport employees that show up every day to work to provide the essential services that we do. Now that the CDC has said if you get fully vaccinated, you don't need to wear a mask in public or in private, or okay, that's great. But remember, when you're on a flight going to your favorite vacation destination to go see Nana, please wear your mask and don't make us turn this airplane around. Well, we hope you're enjoying Squawk Ident. Please help us out. Make sure to subscribe and follow to the Squawk Ident podcast wherever you listen. And if you wouldn't mind, just spend a moment and write us a review on either Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. It does really help us out with our standings in the show. We also appreciate your support and especially your feedback. You can send us audio feedback or comments via our website at www.Av8rTony.com. That's Alpha Victor, the number 8, Romeo Tango, Oscar November Yankee.com. And there you can also find the audio archives, photos from the flight line, our Squawk Ident pilot shop, and our guest book photos tab as well. You can contribute to the show financially. Every donation helps us out. Trust me, we've got subscriptions to pay for and equipment and, you know, a lot of this stuff that goes on behind the scenes, and every penny does help. And, you know, a lot of other shows they have the coffee fund or this fund or the beer fund or whatever fund. And those are great. And trust me, I'd love to one day have the opportunity to have a beer fund. But for now, we're just saying if you can help out in any way, we would definitely appreciate it. Facebook, YouTube, Instagram users can find us under the Squawk Ident podcast. And one final thought. Just want to say thank you to Rob D for being the host extraordinaire. We were going to have Roger on and possibly Kyle on today. Unfortunately or fortunately for them, they're both flying a very full flight schedule. So
so are you. I think I'm the only one at home.
Well, yeah, I guess so, you know. But hey, I'm grateful. I actually got to have a meal at the hotel bar last night. I had a great dinner. Got to eat there. They're starting to open up, you know, even at the hotels.
Great.
So yeah, definitely seeing it going in the right direction.
Yep.
So thanks for taking the time to listen to these grateful aviators. Keep the dirty side down out there. Be safe and take care of each other. Bye, y'all.
All right. Take care.